Uhuru. Brothers and sisters and comrades, this is Omali Yeshitela. I'm chairman of the African People's Socialist Party and leader of the Uhuru movement and the International African Revolution. I want to appreciate your coming to this discussion. This is a discussion that is based on an African internationalist interpretation of what we're seeing in the world. And I want to be clear about that because what I have to say, I know is going to be disappointing for some, especially those who still cling to the notion that our future is either with the Democratic Party or even with America itself as it's currently constituted. My understanding differs from that. And so right now, the thing that's happening that's got so many people focused is the question of Trump's refusal to quit. The media have declared that Joe Biden of the Democratic Party was the actual winner of the presidential contest that just occurred. I should even say the presidential farce. And I say that letting it be clear that I'm not saying this at the behest of some kind of support for some Trumpian nonsense. I equate both Trump or the Republicans and the Democrats from the same camp. They got the same interests, and none of those interests speak to the well-being of African and oppressed peoples around the world. I call it a farcical thing because even before they started killing Africans in this country to make sure that we could not vote, and killing Africans in this country to make sure that by the time they gave us the right to vote in 1965 with the passage of the Voting Rights Act, they had assassinated our leaders, and they were assassinating our leaders, destroying our organizations to make sure that we had nothing to vote for, and that the only organization that would be available to us would be the Democratic Party, which is an imperialist organization, is now, always has been. So obviously that would help me to say that it's a farce, that it is a rigged election. This has nothing to do with Trump. But obviously, if you keep this huge proportion of the African population from even participating, and then after allowing them to participate, you've destroyed their organizations, you've destroyed their capacity to carry out a program in their own interests, you have to say that something is wrong with that process. And whether you do or not, I do. And so do all of us who are African internationalists and members of the African People's Socialist Party. But the other reason I say that is partial is because even when white people were allowed to vote in this process, and I say white people, recognizing, of course, that there was a period of time where the US Constitution did not allow for white women to be a part of the vote. But even before that, this thing that they've created called this electoral college was designed to make sure that the rulers of this country, the elite, and its minions would be the person who would actually elect the president and the vice president of the United States. That's one of the reasons you're looking at the kind of quandary that's being confronted today by so many people. You have a situation where the popular vote doesn't have to mean a damn thing. It doesn't win the election. The election is something that's decided by a handful of people, so-called electors, who have been appointed, generally speaking, by the leaders of the ruling class, minions of representatives in various states around this country. And in December, it is they who will get together and actually vote to elect the president and vice president of the United States. That's the way that's set up. So that's rigged all along to make sure that, generally speaking, nobody who the ruling class as a whole does not want to get elected will get elected. So that's part of why we can say it's rigged. We've seen all of this stuff happening over and over, and African people killed, murdered, and what we're looking at now is a situation that helps to expose what most of us have already known about what they characterize as American democracy to the world. At the same time, this country has been overthrowing governments, doing coups, assassinating leaders who went against the will of the United States corporations and the United States government. At the same time this was happening, the US government was bragging so much about what this free democratic process that exists inside the United States. It was infallible. It was an extraordinarily democratic process. There was no doubt about it. You go to school, that's the thing you learn from the beginning, that other countries have corruption, and other countries sometimes engaged in war and gunfights to settle things like elections or non-elections, that kind of thing, but not the US, we're told. The US is high above that kind of behavior. And what we see, of course, is just the opposite, where Trump, the Republican Party candidate that represents a particular sector of the ruling class in this country, has actually, it appears, to have lost the election. And I say something that we get mostly from bourgeois media, who we are told have used their capacity to look at stats and stuff that shows us that that's the case. And of course, there are various politicians from the Democratic Party, or friends of the Democratic Party, and pundits who carry that same message. But the fact is that the actual election will happen in December. And that's when a handful of people whose fidelity to the rulers of this country will actually vote to make that decision. Nevertheless, it is something to behold as Trump is refusing to leave. And people have attributed his refusal to leave on a number of things. One thing people are saying is because Trump is crazy, that he has various kinds of personality defects, including this extreme narcissism that makes it impossible for him to be able to admit a loss. He characterizes and believes that people who lose are losers, as he would say, and therefore are people who are extraordinarily low esteem. He's characterized various of his opponents as losers. And so that's an important thing to Trump. So there's some people who are saying that, well, Trump is holding on. He refuses to concede defeat, the honorable thing, the kinds of things, that noble thing to do that has historically and traditionally happened in this country, and that gentlemen always do. You know, he's refused to do that because he cannot admit having lost. That's what some people say. And there are people who say that, and I'm sure that's true. I mean, I'm sure that when Trump first started talking about he didn't lose, that it was a rigged election, it was fraudulent, and that they count the votes, that they're miscounting, I'm sure an aspect of that was an instinctive response from this man that we've come to know some things about in terms of how he acts in public, because much of what he does is public. It's on social media, so you can see it. Just like, you know, you saw cousin Susie, who you found embarrassing with the last thing that she put on Facebook. Well, Trump keeps it hanging out there just like that too. So we know a few things about Trump, and we know that he's a narcissist that's not surpassed by many people who we are aware of. So I believe some of that is true. And then there's another assumption that Trump is motivated to stay there and claim that the election was fraudulent, that the election was stolen from him. He said that if the elections were counted fairly, then he would win. There was no doubt about it. And if it didn't happen that way, it's because the election was stolen from him. And so, you know, some assume with some logic that part of the reason that Trump is doing that is because he wants to keep that white nationalist base of his, which I think was the majority of people, white people who voted, seem to have voted for Trump, and seem to be people who are willing to believe what Trump says in terms of the election being stolen, many of whom are willing to pick up guns and things like that, though we didn't see what was expected to come by or was said to have been expected by people who would alarm us to make us more cognizant of the election and this contest surrounding Trump and the need to get rid of Trump. So there's this need, it is assumed, I think correctly so, by Trump to keep that white nationalist base fired up and still willing and ready to fight. One, There's a contest that's happening right now in Georgia where they're still counting. And so the thing is to also to deal with that and to inspire forces for the next election in the state of Georgia, so that which has never gone for a presidential, it's been a long time since Georgia went for a Democratic president. So Trump, it is assumed, is working to try to maintain that and to maintain the Republican Senate majority. And so count. And Georgia is an issue, keeping that white nationalist base excited and fired up. There are others who believe that what Trump is about in refusing to quit, staying there regardless of everything else, refusing to even participate in the transition, so that the power can be handed off from one white ruling class colonial capitalist lackey to another white ruling class colonial capitalist lackey. So he's not making that easy. And some people are fretful of that. And some people who are even patriotic to the United States are fretful of that, or the Democratic Party fretful of that. But don't fret, because the bourgeois state, the colonial capitalist state, will make this thing happen. In fact, the election itself was nothing but a contest between these different sections of the white rulers in this country for control of the state. And that's where most of the power of the executive office is most directly connected to the state apparatus, to the military, to the police, to the intelligence organizations, to the courts and things like that. So here you have most of the direct power of the state concentrated in the executive power. Just like you have most of the national narcissism of America concentrated in Donald Trump. I should say, yeah, America. I almost said white America, but that's being redundant. So you have this situation where there is a need to keep those forces fired up, and in part because some assume that Trump is going to run for president in 2024. And Trump right now, they all admit, has a grip on that Republican Party that very few, even with this crisis that people are talking about in terms of Trump's refusal to quit, even with this challenge to the process and formal process, and to the dignity of the electoral process in the United States, you find few of them at this point willing to tell Trump to shut up and get out of the White House. And partially that's because Trump controls the Republican Party, because the masses of white people who voted, they voted because of Trump. And Trump's relationship to the Republican Party is what kept the Democrats from doing everything they had predicted they were going to do. They were going to sweep the Congress. They were going to take over the Senate. It was going to be the presidency, and the Congress was going to be held on by the Democratic Party. That didn't happen. And it didn't happen because of this mass of white people who believe in Trump. And that's not very difficult to understand as some may suppose it to be. It's because most people in this country, whether they believe in the electoral process or not, whether they are Democrats or Republicans or something else, are tired of this politic of mediocrity, a politic that does not speak to the interests of the mass of the people because of the death grip that a certain sector of the ruling class has on the economy and everything else. So most people are tired of that. Most people are tired of an electoral process that is so discriminatory that nobody can even enter into it effectively or easily in order to pursue their interests as groups of people, like Africans, like Mexicans, like the indigenous people, et cetera. And so that's just a part of the reality that we are looking at. So Trump, it is expected, will run for office. The Republicans are afraid to say anything against Trump because they see their own future tied, electoral future tied to Trump and what Trump is willing to say and whether he's willing to support them, because he has made and he has crushed different opponents. And that's one of the things that we talk about when we say we've learned some things about Trump, because he does it all on social media. Anybody who's opposed him, he's crushed them mercilessly. And so he's got this intimidated group of people who have sacrificed, if they ever had any central belief system, they've sacrificed it to the expediency of being supportive of Trump in order to be reelected themselves. But I think that the fundamental question, I believe all of those are factors, but I believe that the fundamental thing that's happening here too, and I don't think Trump started out this way. I think somebody had to stop Trump and tell him what it was that he was about. Give him what it was that he was about. One, give him the ability to lose without losing. Say, no, I didn't lose, I was cheated, it was fraudulent, et cetera, et cetera. That Trump needs that. He needs to have won even as he lost. That's what he needs to do. That's obviously some kind of a personal character, that personality character that he's trapped with. But I think the thing that we're really looking at here, and we have to remember this, I believe, is that when Trump was elected and went into office, the Democratic Party did the same thing to Trump that the Republican Party through Trump are doing to the Democratic Party or Biden. The Democratic Party, a sector of the ruling class in this country, probably the most significant sector of the ruling class. Even Wall Street is celebrating the victory of Biden, despite the fact that Trump shoveled trillions of dollars over to them. But we still have this situation where Trump is able again to claim the stolen election. The Democrats did the same thing in 2016 when Trump was elected, and they said that Trump didn't win the elections. It was the Russians who did it. It was the Russian interference. It was Russian interference in our so-called democracy. Tell all the dead and oppressed Africans and Mexicans and other people who've been killed all around the world by America about this so-called democracy that has to be protected. And so they're saying the Russians did this. And so with that claim, every day of Trump's presidency, you saw an assault on the legitimacy, his legitimacy as president, because of the so-called Russian gate, Russia gate. It was all Russia. Russia did it. And so Hillary, it doesn't matter who Hillary is, that she is capitalist colonialist scum that celebrated the assassination of Gaddafi, that participated in characterizing African children as predators, and escalated the process with Joe Biden of sticking them into prisons and doing other horrible things to them. That doesn't matter. It doesn't matter that she had a real problem opening her mouth without a lie coming out. That's even when she was eating and drinking, it seemed. And so the thing is that it wasn't anything about that. It wasn't anything the lame kind of response that Hillary Clinton was making to the perceived problems and contradictions that were occurring in this country for people. The Russians did it. And so, and they held that over Trump. It was a part of the process of delegitimizing Trump within their base, so that Trump was never a legitimate president in their base. That's what they did. And now what Trump has done is say that this was a phony election. It was false. It was rigged from the very beginning. I won this election. And if the votes were really counted, it would show I am the victor. So this is the thing that the people who support Trump, and it appears to be the majority of the white people who voted in this election, this is the thing that they will have, and the objective is to cripple a Biden presidency, so that even the mild reforms that Biden talked about before the election, at some time before the election, I can't even remember what they were, to tell you the truth. Bernie Sanders disappeared, Ocasio disappeared, and all of those people who were pushing him to the left, you don't even see them anymore. You didn't hear them in the campaign. So Biden's, whatever his plans that might impede the profits that the capitalists saw themselves getting when Trump was there, all of that is something that the objective is to prevent Biden from being able to go anywhere that they don't want him to go. And so this, I believe, is a primary reason that that Trump is still there. And the apologies that we keep getting from leading members of the Republican Party about Trump's refusal to concede. And I think that the objective, again, is to delegitimize the presidency of Biden, and which is fine with me. But I think that part of what we need to understand, because we said that Trump refuses to quit a sinking ship. And that's not the narrative that you're getting from any place else. You're not getting it from the Republicans or the Democrats. They all talk about this process. And so this legitimate process that's being tampered with are affected by one party or the other. They don't say that we're riding on the Titanic. And really what we're seeing is people just moving around, moving the chairs around on the deck of the Titanic, that the ship is sinking. And in fact, they don't say that it is this sinking ship, that the fact that the ship is sinking, that lends an element of desperation to everything that we're seeing happening on the political scene in this country. They don't say it because they can't say it. They don't say it because to say it would be to admit that their rule is not just, and to admit that it's not permanent. That's one aspect of it. They can't say that. And each of these forces has a stake in maintaining the system, the status quo, etc. So that's one thing about it. They can't say it. Some of them who call themselves nationalists and communists and what have you, because they don't have a scientifically founded, scientifically grounded assessment of what it is that brought this whole thing into existence and keeps it running. And because they don't have that assessment, they can't see the ship is sinking. What they do recognize often is the desperation in the social system, that Trump is a pig who's capable of doing horrible, even more egregious assaults on Black people and people around the world. But Biden is responsible for a 500% increase in the number of people who are in prison in this country. He's responsible for the fact that 1 out of every 8 human beings in the world who's in prison is an African in this country. So it's a system that is in a state of desperation. But let's talk about why the system is in a state of desperation. Let's look at the fact that for a number of years, for a long time now, there has been this crisis of the executive branch of the United States government. And I speak about the United States government, the executive branch, that's because where most of the leadership, the hands-on leadership, if you will, over the state apparatus is located, is concentrated. The military forces, all of them, some that you don't even know about, some running all across Africa now, killing people and taking our land and resources. Some you do know about because they call them police in the United States and what have you. The executive branch controls these forces, controls the FBI, the CIA, the NSA, the GN, the global, the National Global Spatial Intelligence Entity, the one that they're setting down right now in St. Louis, Missouri, as we have this discussion. This is the executive branch. It's over all of that stuff, over the courts and that arm of the, and I know that's supposed to be untrue because it says you got 3 branches of government and they're all equal in their balance of power. And you saw how balanced it was when they wanted this woman who is now the Supreme Court that replaced Ruth Ginsburg, Beta. You see the president pick somebody who said was going to do what they wanted to do. The Senate confirmed her because they said she's going to do what we want them to do. And then that's how she got on. So she got on that seat. Because the president decided that she was somebody who's going to carry out the wishes of the state. So let's look at the fundamental question that we're looking at, period, that most are not able to talk about. And that is that the whole system, everything that we see happening in Washington, D.C., everything that we see happening in Berlin, Germany, everything that we see happening throughout the European world rests on a foundation of enslavement and colonialism. the colonial enslavement, the attack on Africa, critical thing that happened that created the entire economy of the world was the assault on Africa on 1600 years ago, 600 years ago. When Portugal attacked Africa and started this trade in African people around the world that dispersed us all around the world. That's one aspect of it. But the other aspect of it, it created the economy. The economic system that dominates the whole world came out of that process, came out of colonizing peoples around the world. This is what shifted the resources of the peoples of the world to America, to Europe, and what have you, and created the capitalist system itself. That's where it comes. That's where it comes from. And what we are seeing is virtually every time, if you want to measure the crisis that we're looking at now, look at what's happening with the struggles of the people to break out of this situation. And we can go back particularly to the 50s, and when we saw the 50s was really important because we saw the US government, they'd go into Iran, they overthrow the Iranian government, they overthrow the government in Guatemala. We see this extraordinary activity that's happening in order to try and maintain the status quo. You saw them making war against Korea because in 1947 and 1949, India first and then China second became independent and free. And so these were forces and countries and resources that the capitalist system required for its ongoing progress, for its ongoing sustainability. And peoples around the world taking back our freedom and saying that we want to be free on our own terms. And in the 50s, you saw the rise of the Kenyan Land Freedom Army, Mau Mau, fighting against the British Empire and what have you. In the 50s, you saw similar things happen in Vietnam. You also see at the same time, Eisenhower, this guy that people so love to talk about because he says something about the rise of the industrial military complex. Well, the reality is before Eisenhower was talking about that, he was in Vietnam. He had put forces into Vietnam. In the 50s, you see that kind of thing happening. And we saw Eisenhower, the Republican, along with Kennedy, the Democrats, participate in the assassination of Patrice Lumumba in Congo. We saw in the 50s, we saw in the 60s and 50s also, the Cuban Revolution had a serious impact. The world is just being changed, being transformed everywhere. And at the same time, these revolutions was happening, was creating crisis in the series and the centers of imperialism. So in the 60s, we see one president having to resign, and the vice president having to resign. In the 60s, we see another president executed, assassinated by an arm of the state itself. In the 60s, we saw one president only could run for one term because what? Vietnam. And it was the struggles around Vietnam, the struggles on the streets of Africa in this country that created the crisis, that all concentrated, coming together at a certain time. And right now, peoples all around the world are fighting against US imperialism. How long have they been in Afghanistan? How long have they been challenging the people of Iran? And of course, this has been a long-term stuff. We talk about Iran in the immediate sense, but that goes all the way back to the 50s. How long have they strangled the people in the Americas? When did they invade the Dominican Republic and do the coup in Guatemala and overthrow our Benz? I mean, it's been an ongoing process. And then what is happening is the people are fighting back and struggling back. And this struggle challenges the stability of the entire capitalist social system. It challenges the economy because people begin to take back our own resources and creates instability there. Wall Street can't know what the hell is going to happen. Nobody can know what the hell is happening because people are struggling to take back their resources. And in the United States, even of late, and we've seen this happen historically in the United States, but of late, where there have been thousands of protests and uprisings in opposition to the colonial terror that's absolutely necessary to maintain a stranglehold on Black people in this country. These are things that is really important to understand when you want to understand something about this crisis, because we're looking at a crisis, but we're looking at a sinking ship that Trump refuses to quit a sinking ship. And Biden wants to become the captain of a ship that's sinking. And the fact is, this is the Titanic that they are sitting on. And therefore, it is nothing that we should be afraid of, Africans. It's nothing that we should be afraid of, comrades who are out there. The system is in crisis. And the only reason we would suffer crisis is if we accept the crisis of the system as our own. What we have to do in the African People's Socialist Party, this is our call. Join the revolutionary organization of the future. Join the African People's Socialist Party, Africans who are stretched across the globe, who are determined to take back our Africa, to take back our resources, to take back our freedom, our dignity, and humanity. Join the African People's Socialist Party. And then the other things that you can do, if you're looking at the electoral question and you think that's important, then come to the Black is Back Coalition for Social Justice, Peace, and Reparations. To join the African People's Socialist Party, go to apspuhuru.org, and to learn more about the Black is Back Coalition for Social Justice, Peace, and Reparations. And you should go to blackisbackcoalition.org. And the Black is Back Coalition is having its 5th annual electoral school in April of next year. And this school is something that we want to use to train people so that you can intervene in the electoral process as long as it's there and our people are using that to elevate our struggle to another level. You can learn how to do that. We can take the mystery out of it. We can put revolution on the agenda, or we can put certain reform that contributes to revolution on the agenda. And so this is going to be the 5th school, and it's going to be happening in April. So go to blackisbackcoalition.org to learn how you can participate in that. Because we don't have to be upset or concerned one way or the other. I think we should know enough by now to recognize that our communities need to be organized. Our community need to be armed. Our community needs to be diligent and active in looking out for our own interests as an independent social force. And that's who we are. We are the African People's Socialist Party. We are the African People's Socialist Party. We are African internationalists. We say down with colonialism. We can defeat colonialism. It's being defeated all around the world. That's why you see Trump acting the way he's acting. And that's why we say that the ship is sinking. It doesn't matter because the peoples of the world are going to take back our freedom, take back our resources, take back our dignity as people.